The Galactic Concord prided itself on its longevity. 10,000 years of order, diplomacy, and balance, an intricate dance of empires that rose and fell, but never dared to disturb the fragile peace among the elder races. They had seen 1,000 kinds of wars, but never anything like what was coming. When humanity was first discovered, the Concord barely cared. A small, noisy species from an insignificant blue planet on the edge of a yellow star. Primitive by galactic standards. Ambitious to the point of arrogance. They called themselves humans, a word that carried more defiance than wisdom. To the Concord, they were nothing but children playing with nuclear fire. Ambassador HFY of the Threxian Collective still remembered the first transmission from Sol, grainy, overmodulated, full of laughter and static. Humans announcing their entry into the stars, promising peace and cooperation, and immediately asking if there was a galactic bar they could visit. They were strange. Crude. But undeniably alive. The Concord allowed them provisional trade rights, restricted access, minimal contact. A species so young and volatile could not possibly survive long in a galaxy shaped by titans. The galaxy was merciful in its neglect. Then came the Zarketh Dominion. The Dominion was an empire of nightmares, vast, cold, and efficient. A species evolved from apex predators who had never known fear. For centuries they had expanded unopposed, consuming systems like wildfire. To them, humanity's mining colonies were merely resources waiting to be claimed. When the Dominion demanded surrender, Earth refused. When they demanded tribute, humanity laughed. When they launched their first strike, humanity fought back. No one in the Concord expected it to last more than a week. The first battles were slaughter. Human fleets, thinly spread, underpowered, and technologically inferior, were annihilated. Mars burned. The Europa colonies fell silent. The skies of Titan turned to molten glass. The news feeds across the galaxy carried images of shattered human vessels drifting through vacuum, bodies frozen mid-scream. And yet, there was something about the way they died that disturbed those watching. Every time a ship was destroyed, its last transmission was laughter. Every time a colony fell, a new one sent a message of defiance. The Concord convened to discuss it. Ambassador HFY argued for observation rather than interference. The humans, he said, are reckless and short-lived. They will burn brightly and vanish quickly, like sparks in oxygen. But he was wrong. The sparks didn't fade. They spread. Within weeks, the humans were adapting faster than any species had ever recorded. Civilian transports became warships. Mining lasers became cannons. Engineers converted asteroids into fortresses. They used whatever was left, whatever was broken, and made it deadly. Their desperation became their strategy. Ambassador HFY observed their transmissions from a monitoring outpost orbiting Kelna Prime. What he saw both fascinated and terrified him. Human command centers operated in chaos, no rigid hierarchies, no genetic castes or centralized minds like the Dominion used. Orders came in fragments, decisions made on instinct. And somehow, it worked. A fleet with no leader would outmaneuver an enemy 10 times its size. A single frigate would destroy an entire cruiser by ramming it at relativistic speed. When fuel ran out, humans learned to siphon plasma directly from enemy wreckage. They didn't follow the rules of war. They rewrote them. The Dominion responded with fury, deploying their most powerful war beasts, bioengineered titans that could tear stations apart with magnetic limbs. Humanity countered by turning orbital shipyards into kinetic catapults, hurling debris the size of cities at their attackers. The galaxy watched in silence. Then, on the 52nd day of the war, something happened that no historian would ever forget. Every comm array in the sector lit up at once, every frequency hijacked, every encryption bypassed. The voice that followed was unmistakably human, distorted by static and exhaustion. You think you've cornered us. But you don't understand. We've been cornered since the day we learned to walk upright. The transmission crackled. Screams and gunfire echoed in the background. You thought this was victory? You thought this was the end? No. We're not running out of options. We are the option. The voice faded, replaced by the faint sound of laughter, wild, unbroken, utterly fearless. The Dominion declared it psychological warfare. The Concorde called it madness. Ambassador HFY, however, felt something else, something ancient stirring in his blood. Fear. Because he had seen desperate species before. He had seen doomed civilizations go quietly into extinction, mourning their fall. But never had he seen one celebrate it. Humanity wasn't fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for something else, something far more dangerous. They were fighting to prove a point. In the following weeks, reports grew more erratic. Dominion fleets would vanish in asteroid belts. Communications would fail for hours, then return filled with human laughter. One Zarketh admiral described it in a final report before his ship disappeared. They bleed, they burn, and then they come back sharper. We crush them, and they call it practice. The Concorde debated intervention. Some feared that if the Dominion won, humanity would be exterminated, a tragic but inevitable outcome. Others warned that if humanity survived, they might become a contagion of defiance, infecting the galaxy with their unrelenting will to fight. Ambassador HFY simply watched. He watched footage of human soldiers welding armor plates while their ships were still under fire. He watched children in the ruins of Luna carving messages of hope onto the hulls of evacuation transports. He watched a pilot eject from a burning fighter and drift toward an enemy frigate, triggering her suit's reactor in a final explosion that crippled the ship. And when he was asked for his opinion before the Concorde Council, he said only this: "They are not a species built for peace. They are a species built for survival at any cost." The room fell silent. Because in a galaxy where war was waged with precision and calculation, humanity had introduced something far more terrifying: chaos. And chaos, once unleashed, could never be contained. As the weeks turned to months, a pattern emerged. Every time the humans faced annihilation, they grew stronger. Every time hope fell, they found another way to fight. The Concorde had seen empires built on conquest, on logic, on faith, but never one built on desperation. By the 100th day of the war, the galaxy understood one simple truth. Humanity didn't just survive desperation. They thrived in it. And in their madness, in their laughter amid ruin, the stars began to whisper the first version of a phrase that would one day define an era. Beware the species that turns desperation into victory. The war had long since stopped making sense. By the 200th day of the conflict, humanity had lost nearly everything. Earth's orbital shipyards were reduced to twisted rings of metal. The colonies on Mars and Europa were gone, burned or starved. The surviving fleet was a patchwork of scavenged wreckage, a swarm of limping vessels kept alive by engineers who no longer believed in sleep. And yet, they kept fighting. Captain Alara D. Vane hadn't seen Earth's skies in over a year. She barely remembered the color blue. Her ship, HSS Indomitable, was a relic of desperation, an amalgam of scorched hulls, reprogrammed alien tech, and welded faith. The crew called it the ghost with a heartbeat. Every surface bore the scars of survival: melted armor plates, flickering consoles, oxygen lines patched with polymer tubing. They'd run out of everything except defiance. The Zarketh Dominion's fleets numbered in the thousands, vast living ships pulsating with bioluminescent veins. Against them, humanity's vessels looked like metal coffins. Yet somehow, the impossible continued. Every time the Dominion cornered the humans bit back harder. Admiral Korvac of the Zarketh had once mocked them in a broadcast. "You are fireflies challenging suns." The humans replied the next day by destroying one of his suns. No one knew how. The official story spoke of a mining colony sacrificing its reactors to ignite a chain reaction inside the star's plasma fields. Billions died, including every human within 10 light minutes. But the Dominion lost a third of its fleet stationed there. The humans called it Operation Scorchvile. It was insanity, pure and unfiltered, and it worked. In war councils across the galaxy, the Concorde watched the impossible unfold. Humans were taking the tools of their destruction and reshaping them into weapons. When their fuel reserves dwindled, they built reactors from decaying isotopes found in wreckage. When ammunition ran dry, They fired tungsten rods from railguns powered by captured Dominion cores. When their soldiers died faster than they could be replaced, civilians volunteered: miners, doctors, farmers, fighting not for survival, but because they refused to leave the last stand unfinished. The galaxy called them suicidal. Humanity called it efficient. Ambassador HFY continued observing from orbit, recording every encounter. His reports to the Threxian Council became frantic, almost reverent. "They have begun to treat death as currency," he wrote. "They trade it freely, and somehow, they profit." At first, the Threxians dismissed it as exaggeration. But the numbers spoke for themselves. Every major defeat the humans suffered led to a larger counterstrike days later. It was as if pain itself was their signal to evolve. The Concorde began to whisper a new term: adaptive desperation. Captain Devane embodied it. On her bridge, surrounded by shattered screens and trembling lights, she studied the star maps: territories lost, fleets gone. Her officers waited for orders, the silence heavy with exhaustion. Finally, she spoke. "If we can't outbuild them, we'll outlast them. If we can't outlast them, we'll outthink them. And if that fails," she looked up, her voice a rasp, "we'll outcrazy them." They laughed. It wasn't humor. It was ritual. That night, Indomitable led a flotilla of 12 ships into the Kear's Rift, a dead zone where magnetic storms shredded sensors. Dominion ships never entered it. No one sane would. Devane saw opportunity where others saw death. Inside the rift, they found what they needed: wreckage from a century-old battle, thousands of dead hulls adrift. Her engineers scavenged reactor cores, charged ion drives, and built the largest minefield in history, an invisible trap strung together by gravity and madness. When the Dominion fleet followed them in, thinking the humans were cornered, the trap was sprung. The rift lit up like a newborn sun. Thousands of Zarketh vessels vanished in the explosion. The shockwave destabilized the entire region's space-time field, collapsing it into a singularity. The humans barely escaped, losing 9 of their 12 ships, but they'd destroyed nearly a tenth of the Dominion's war power in one blow. The galaxy gasped. Ambassador HFY watched the footage, unable to comprehend the logic. Why would a species sacrifice itself so freely? Why build victory out of suicide? He posed the question directly to a captured human pilot during a rare diplomatic exchange. The pilot smiled, teeth bloodstained, eyes too bright. "Because," he said, "dying is easy. Losing is what we can't stand." By the 3rd year of war, Dominion morale began to crumble. Crews mutinied rather than face humans. Officers resigned. Whispers spread of ghost fleets, human ships that fought even after destruction, guided by AI fragments of their captains' minds. No one could prove it. No one wanted to. The Zarketh began to retreat. Their empire, built on fear, was suddenly discovering a predator that fed on fear itself. Humanity's desperation had become contagious. And it was spreading. In the archives of the Threxian Collective, a recovered transmission from Indomitable was labeled Human Command Log Number 872. The voice of Captain Devane was low, almost tender, speaking to her crew before another suicidal engagement. "We are not the strongest. We are not the fastest. But we are the ones who keep going. When the fire runs out of fuel, we become the fuel." After that, she ordered the fleet into a system 3 jumps beyond human space, one they never returned from. But the effect of that act rippled through the stars. The Dominion's fleets began to fracture. The Concorde, once neutral, started secretly funneling resources to humanity, terrified of what would happen if they lost. Not because they loved the humans, but because they feared what would replace them if they fell. Ambassador HFY summarized it perfectly in his final report to the Council. "They have found a way to weaponize despair. Every loss feeds them. Every death becomes momentum. They burn everything: fear, grief, exhaustion, and from that ash, they rise again." He paused before sending it. "The humans have become a fire that consumes itself, and yet somehow, it still grows." From that day forward, the galaxy stopped asking if humanity could win. The question became far more frightening. What would victory look like for a species that never learned when to stop fighting? The end should have come long ago. By all calculations, humanity had no fleets left capable of standing against the Zarketh Dominion. Their colonies were shadows, their population reduced by half. The war had devoured everything: cities, oceans, memories. Even the stars seemed dimmer. But somehow, the humans still fought. They gathered what remained: every drifting hulk, every half-dead ship, every soul still willing to fight, and forged the last fleet. 207 ships. Barely functional. Scarred and wheezing. They met in the void above the dying sun of Valthra Prime, a graveyard system where even light seemed reluctant to pass. Captain Ilara D. Vane stood at the heart of it all, aboard the HSS Indomitable. Her ship was a miracle stitched from nightmares, alien armor grafted to human steel, plasma conduits held together by prayer and duct tape. The bridge was lit by the dim glow of failing displays and the hard light of determination. Her crew waited. Nobody spoke. They all knew what this was: not a mission, not a battle. It was a tombstone carved in fire. Devane's voice broke the silence. This is our line. No one else left. No more worlds to retreat to. They think we're cornered. They think this is the end. But they've forgotten what we do when we're cornered. She smiled, a cracked, blood-stained smile. We bite. Across the system, sensors lit up. The Dominion was coming. 5,000 warbeasts, living ships the size of continents, emerging from warp like gods descending from heaven. Each one pulsed with hunger, bristling with weapons designed to flay planets. Admiral Korvac, commander of the Dominion Armada, watched the human fleet on his holographic display. 200 metal corpses drifting like dust. He laughed. End this farce, he ordered. Erase their star. The first volley tore through the void. Beams of annihilation struck the human line and were met with silence. No counterfire. No retreat. Only static. Then, the static changed. It became music. Old Earth music, distorted and ancient, carried on every open frequency. Drums, strings, and human voices raised in harmony. The kind of sound no alien mind could understand. A sound that didn't belong in war. The Dominion hesitated. Then, the humans moved. Every dead ship in the fleet powered up at once, engines roaring to life. Hulls split open to reveal weaponry welded together from scavenged alien parts. The humans had hidden in plain sight, waiting for the perfect moment. And then came the trap. The Valthra expanse wasn't just a battlefield. It was a minefield. 4 months, the humans had been seeding it with magnetized debris, dormant fusion cores, and broken reactor shells. The moment the Dominion's weapons fired, the magnetic fields destabilized, triggering a cascade of chain reactions across the system. The void itself caught fire. Thousands of Dominion ships vanished in an instant, swallowed by detonations that turned space into white light. The shockwave crippled sensors and tore apart formations. Amid the chaos, human strike teams launched boarding pods, not sleek or coordinated, but desperate, wild, human. Zero-gravity Marines, most missing limbs, all with eyes like burning coal, crashed into the bellies of living ships and cut them open from the inside. Plasma axes, makeshift explosives, and screams filled the corridors. They didn't fight like soldiers. They fought like survivors with nothing left to lose. On the Indomitable, D-Vane's crew fought to keep the reactor stable. Every alarm blared red. Chief Engineer Malik shouted over the din, "We're running hot. Core temperature critical." "Good," D-Vane said, grinning through the smoke. "Let's make it hotter." They plunged the ship straight into the heart of the Dominion formation. A suicidal move, but suicide had become humanity's favorite tactic. They rammed through the flank of a warbeast twice their size, tearing through armor, leaving trails of fire. The Indomitable's railguns fired point-blank, molten shards piercing the creature's heart. It died screaming, and the humans rode the explosion forward like a wave. From orbit, the battle looked like madness, a storm of light and wreckage, a dance of ruin that no algorithm could predict. The Dominion couldn't comprehend it. Their commanders tried to coordinate. Their fleets tried to adapt. But humanity had long since abandoned logic. They were no longer fighting to win. They were fighting to make meaning. Halfway through the battle, Communications from Earth Command finally came through, a single encrypted pulse. Devane opened it. A hologram flickered above the console. Admiral Rojas, blooded, uniform in tatters. "Captain," he rasped, "the Dominion's reinforcement fleet is en route. You won't survive this." "Not planning to," she replied. "Then what are you?" She cut the channel. "They'll never understand," she muttered. Her crew did. Every officer aboard Indomitable looked to her, waiting for the last order. Devane took a deep breath, eyes fixed on the burning stars ahead. "If we fall," she said, "make sure they remember why they feared us." They nodded. And then they executed the unthinkable. The ship's AI core, patched together from the minds of fallen crew, began to hum. A deep, resonant tone filled the air as the reactor overloaded. Every remaining human ship followed suit. The humans had wired the entire fleet to detonate their cores in sequence, turning themselves into a cascading singularity, a man-made supernova. A final act of defiance that would take the Dominion with them. Admiral Korvac screamed orders, but it was too late. The Indomitable dove straight into the Dominion's flagship, reactor overloading, hull glowing like a newborn star. Devane's final transmission echoed across every open frequency. "We're not gods. We're not monsters. We're just human. And that's enough." Then she was gone. The Indomitable exploded, igniting the chain. One by one, the ships followed. The entire Valthra system became a burning grave of light and sound, the largest explosion the galaxy had ever seen. When it cleared, the Dominion armada was gone. No human ships survived. But the galaxy was forever changed. For months afterward, the Zarketh Dominion fell into chaos. Entire fleets refused orders. Some captains refused to fight again. Others fled into the void, haunted by the battle they couldn't explain, a battle fought not for conquest, but for dignity. The Concord convened an emergency session to discuss humanity's fate. There was nothing left to find, no signals, no colonies, no survivors. Only fragments of wreckage orbiting a dying star. Ambassador Shirk-A played the recovered transmission before the assembly. "We're not gods. We're not monsters. We're just human." The chamber was silent. For the first time in millennia, the elder races felt something they hadn't known since the dawn of the Concord, awe. Because they realized what had truly happened at Valthra Prime, not a defeat, not even a victory. It was a demonstration. A message written in fire and blood across the stars. Do not mistake survival for weakness. Do not mistake desperation for surrender. The humans had burned themselves to ash. And in that ash, a legend was born. It was said that the stars over Valthra Prime never shone the same again. Even centuries later, the region still shimmered with the ghost light of 1,000 detonations. Radiation storms whispered through the wreckage of 2 annihilated fleets, and shards of alien and human metal drifted together in endless orbit, a cosmic memorial no one dared disturb. The Zarketh Dominion never recovered. Their empire fractured within a decade. Their soldiers, once proud and fearless, now twitched at shadows. The name human became a curse in their tongue, a word that meant the flame that refuses to die. Entire Dominion worlds revolted, whispering the same legend, that the humans hadn't perished, but had become the fire itself. And maybe, in a way, they had. The quiet after the storm. Ambassador Shirk-A, now old and frail, returned to the ruins of the Valthra expanse aboard a Threxian survey ship. His species lived long, too long, perhaps, and he carried the memory of that war like a wound that would not heal. He floated among the drifting wrecks, his ship's scanners mapping what was left of the human fleet. Each piece of debris told a story. Melted metal fused with alien bone. Weapons carved from scrap. The signature of impossible engineering done by hands that refused to stop, even in madness. And then, among the wreckage, they found her. The HSS Indomitable, scarred, half vaporized, but still intact. Its hull was blackened, pocked with radiation burns, its reactor cold for centuries. Yet, somehow, a single beacon still pulsed within. Shirk-A ordered a boarding team immediately. Inside, the air was dead. The corridors were frozen tombs, walls lined with frost and silence. The team moved through dim emergency lights until they reached the bridge. There she was, Captain Ilara Devane. Her body sat in the captain's chair, hands still resting on the armrests, eyes closed, uniform scorched. Around her, the crew sat at their posts, preserved in cryostasis, long since gone. But the console still flickered. One log file. One message. Log 999 at Devane, E. Victory isn't about winning. It's about refusing to stop trying. The Threxian crew stood in silence. Even the ship's AI dared not speak. Ambassador HFY bowed his head. He had seen empires built on conquest, built on technology, built on divine right, and all of them had fallen. But these fragile, self-destructive beings had built something different, a legacy no defeat could erase. When the Threxian ship transmitted the recovered log across the Concord networks, it spread like wildfire. And the galaxy listened. 2. The doctrine of desperation. In the centuries that followed, humanity became more myth than memory. No survivors were ever found. The Earth, scorched and abandoned, was a quiet world of ruins and rebirth. Nature reclaimed its cities. The oceans rose, the forests grew, and life began again as if the planet itself were holding its breath. But in the stars, the idea of humanity endured. Scholars, philosophers, and warlords studied the records of the human Zarketh War. They called it the doctrine of desperation, the strategic, psychological, and moral principle that weakness, properly embraced, becomes invincible. They documented humanity's paradoxes. How they could be dying and still laughing. How they could fight best when already defeated. How they saw hope not as a condition, but as a decision. The Concord turned their teachings into a creed. Young officers in military academies recited Devane's final words as an oath. Refused to stop trying. Even the Zarketh, the old enemy, adopted fragments of human tactics, the use of improvisation, the acceptance of chaos, the embrace of risk. They no longer spoke of humans as vermin, but as the broken gods. In time, the memory of humanity reshaped civilization itself. 3. The return. 300 years after the Battle of Valthra, deep space probes detected something impossible, a signal. It came from beyond the galactic rim, from the uncharted dark. Old encryption. Old language. Human. It was faint, fragmented, a voice repeating through the static, echoing across centuries. We're still here. At first, it was dismissed as noise, a ghost transmission. But the more they listened, the clearer it became. There were patterns. Coordinates. A pulse of data buried in the carrier wave blueprints for a drive system the Concorde had never seen. It used gravitational fold dynamics technology far beyond what humanity had ever possessed. The power source. A combination of black hole radiation and organic feedback loops. The math shouldn't have worked. And yet, it did. The discovery split the Concorde in half. Some believed humanity had ascended, evolved into something beyond flesh, beyond extinction. Others claimed it was a trap, a digital echo left by dying machines. HFY's descendants, diplomats, scholars, believers led an expedition beyond the rim to find the source. They never returned. But before they vanished, their last transmission reached home, a visual of a massive structure in the void, a ringworld of shattered metal and light, orbiting a newborn star. And at its center, a single inscription burned across its inner hull, written in ancient human script. From ashes, we rise. 4. The lesson. Thousands of years later, when new civilizations rose and fell, the name human was still spoken not as a curse, nor a prayer, but as a warning and a promise. Children on distant worlds learned the stories of Earth, of a species so stubborn that even extinction couldn't silence them. Soldiers painted Devane's star on their armor before battle. Explorers carried small emblems shaped like the ancient human spiral, the DNA coil, a symbol of endless evolution. And somewhere, out there, in the cold void beyond the maps, there were sightings. Ships without registry, moving faster than light, piloted by beings that looked almost human, but not quite. They came only when wars reached their darkest hours. They came when entire species faced extinction. And always, they brought the same message. Desperation isn't defeat. It's ignition. Then they vanished again, leaving behind worlds that found the courage to fight back. The epilogue, the species that turns desperation into victory. The galaxy would never agree on what happened to humanity. Some said they died in their final blaze. Others said they transcended into something greater. But every scholar, every soldier, every civilization knew one truth. The humans had changed the meaning of survival. They had proven that will alone, naked, defiant, impossible will, could defy extinction itself. They had shown that the edge of despair was not the end, but the beginning of transformation. They had taught the stars to hope. And so, long after their worlds were dust, the title remained, carried from one generation to the next, a whisper across the cosmic sea. Beware the species that turns desperation into victory. Because whenever the universe grew cold, whenever the light began to fade, the legend would ignite again. And in the distance, some lonely outpost would pick up a faint, laughing transmission, echoing through the dark. We're not out of options. We are the option.